Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob podcast. This is Matt.
I'm Joe.
And we are on episode 69. We're going to call this the Love Affair or a Valentine's Day special. We'll talk about 3D printing. We'll talk about the community and some of the things that have been going on lately with regulations, contests that are going on, a little quick blurb about aviation and Valentine's Day and how people bring love through the air. And then, Joe, you said you're going to talk about some 3D printing. You've been going pretty aggressively at getting some 3D prints out and good quality. At least you were. You're definitely doing a lot of troubleshooting.
I was, and it's still sitting there powered off. So,
well, maybe we could talk about the why and some of the other considerations within 3D printing when we get to it.
no, at this point, hit my mic.
That's all right.
At this point, it's largely sitting there because I just haven't taken the time, which seems like it's always my excuse. But
well, it's a hobby. It's a thing you do when you have spare time. And when you have spare time, that is also divided amongst things you want to do, things you have to do, things you are excited to try, and also sometimes you're just tired.
Yeah, well, so I guess we'll kind of talk about what we've been up to, and I can explain why some of that hasn't happened. So previous 2 weekends ago was actually when the last episode released, a week late. So sorry about that, guys.
And thank you very much for being patient about it. I know a number of you mentioned something, and we appreciate your diligence and making sure that we didn't need help. But yeah, and I also appreciate that you guys were excited to see it come out. And we did get it out. I hope it was, it seems like it was well received. So.
But due to both of us having things going on and then you doing the initial pass, and then by the time I got around to doing the next pass, it was after I had linked up with my work buddies on a Friday night, so Saturday rolled around and I was just shot.
So you cannot be held responsible for the quality, or no, I'm just kidding. It's tough to do one of these on a hangover. I'm sure.
No, I was just tired. I mean, I figured I was hanging with the work. When I say hanging with the work buddies, we do Friday night game night.
Oh, nice.
So we'll just link up in Discord and play some games.
That sounds fun.
We don't always get the whole department together, just a couple of us, and sometimes just me and my manager. But it's a team building and keeping the communications open.
Yeah.
Outside of work, although I end up talking about work a lot. And then, which frustrates him to no end, I'm sure.
Dang it, Joe. Would you please stop?
That's exactly at work. That's kind of what he says. And I say, just a minute, I want to talk about this thing real quick. But then Sundays were involved with church. We had a big church thing. And then we started, so after that, with work, we had a big project get put on us. I won't go too much into details other than I kind of shouldered the load on that one. Though I won't say like it was all me. My coworkers had to pick up their own, and that I was glued to my desk for 2 weeks, not able to get out in the field and do stuff. So others had to do stuff, but so by the time I got home in the evenings, I was just shot, and then rolled up to this past weekend, and I thought I was going to die. I was sick. So,
yeah, you had said that it wasn't pretty.
It was not. It started early in the morning, and but basically, it was not pretty. And I won't go into any more than that.
You don't need to. I think everybody's been down that path once or twice in their lives, and all you need is once. So it just kind of puts you down for the count for a minute.
More than a minute. But that kicked in on the weekend, and then this past week was still continuing to this past week was pushing, deploying the project, and then, fighting fires in the process of it having been deployed. So,
always
the 3D printer, last I checked, is working.
Mm-hmm.
It should be working fine. I need to level the bed. But
I thought you had a bed leveler that does all that for you.
I do.
Well, I mean, you got to get it close-ish.
Yeah, but
you can't just have like a slanted plane and say, you figure it out.
But it does have to be a lot closer than I thought it had to be.
Okay.
I pretty much have to make sure it's about level every time. Anyway, but I can talk about the mods that are on it later.
Okay.
And I will say, when we get to the 3D printer spot, I'm going to be speaking specifically from the perspective of I have the Creality Ender 3.
Okay.
Not Pro, no fancy nothings, just Creality Ender 3. And so
unless you're one of those guys who's doing the 3D printing podcast kind of stuff, and you've got like 6 or 7 different models that you've experienced, really you can only talk about the one that you've worked on. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to all the other people talk about theirs, you can kind of get a sense as to which ones have what problems. But you and I are not that deep. It is a passing hobby, I think, at this point for either of us.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I got planes I need to print. And I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I've seen some successful prints coming out of you in the past. Mm-hmm. And then I see like the little barbecue skewer reinforcements, and that's about it that I've seen lately.
Oh, so, yeah. It's been I've made a bunch of whistles.
Okay. Well, that's something.
Yeah, it's something. It really not a whole lot. That has not been my focus remotely. So,
although reading the reviews on those whistles, it sounds like some of them can get really loud.
Oh, yeah. Look, when they print right, you got to cover your ears as you blow them. But that's the goal. So I'm printing them out for the scouts that are in my pack. And so we teach them like, hey, if you're lost, you don't walk around. You just pull out your whistle and you just repeatedly blow until somebody hears you and comes out and hopefully finds you. You will likely will not lose your breath, but you will lose your voice. So we teach them to take out, so they should always have a whistle. And I wanted them to have a very loud whistle. The problem is those whistles are really loud.
Yeah, and you give really loud things to little boys.
That's how I like to do it. And we want boys and girls, don't forget.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's not like it used to be.
I know.
We give the opportunity of learning to have fun in the wilderness to all kids. I'll leave it there. All right. So what have you been?
I will have my opinion.
I'm sure.
Yeah. That's what I've been up to.
Okay.
So well, yeah. Good. What you have going
on? Let's see. Sure. I think when it was released, we had a build day. I've been having kind of a build day either a Friday or every Friday or Saturday. I pick one of those kind of times. I'm not always sure when it's going to be until usually a couple days before. Like right now, I know mine's going to be Saturday morning, kind of early. But because it's Build-ruary, I host a small challenge on the flight test forums, challenging people to build 4 foam planes or other, if you choose to be that sadistic. Choose 4 planes, build 4, and fly them and film it and post it in the month of February. 4 weeks, 4 planes. Good luck, and we'll see you at the end.
How are folks doing in that so far?
It's a mixed bag, as always. There are some who have done nothing. They have declared stuff. Some of them even haven't done that, but they said that they're interested. There are folks who are chugging straight along. It's actually more than I thought we would have that are really kind of trucking at it. We've got some of the people we've talked about here had as guest Tony, who's in a lot of our build nights, and Jesse Zediak. He's a little distracted right now. He ended up building himself a gaming table / building table but he's been using it for gaming lately. So he's been busy doing 3D printing of game parts and stuff like that. So, but he's also been engaged in the Build-ruary process, and he has, I think, built himself a Wonder already. And I think he's got a couple others that he is chugging right along with. Tony has built a really beautiful indoor flyer that weighs like 128 grams. Looks like a 2-seater biplane or a 2-seater low wing, but from like the World War I or Golden Age era.
Okay.
We got everybody who's anybody who's involved with it, really kind of going at it. So, also in February, we have our, in the Cub Scouts, we do for our pack, we do camping, and we use that opportunity of all that time just sitting in a gym to do a STEM night. So we do a bunch of science demonstrations and all that kind of stuff. And since I've learned about flight test, I have always had the kids build a plane with me. So I'll take one of the plans, they're free, and mount them to like 9 or 8 pieces of foam board, and I'll cut them out on my bandsaw, or the scroll saw is actually what I use. And I'll cut out a bunch of plan sets. So in this case, I cut out 18 FT long easies, which were a really good choice as a chuck lighter. It turns out they're an amazing chuck lighter. Oh, that's the other Muttley, who is Ethan Jacobs. What's that J somewhere? Ethan Jacobs. There we go. Ethan Jacobs, even Jason Kennedy's back in it a little bit. He won it the one year. Yeah, people are building simple planes. Some are building really complex planes. But either way, everybody's building planes, which is really cool. So the STEM night, I had my 12 kids and associated parents sit down and build the chuck gliders, and they were a big success. I had some colored tape that we used to kind of hold the upper and lower fuselage together. They kind of sit on a center plate, and it gave a lot of great color. Kids really enjoyed it. They chuck amazing. So it's easy to balance, and they fly really good when you throw it hard, that's the only thing kids know how to do. Eventually, some of them kind of go, I'm not really sure. Oh, Miles Berkiomatic is also doing Flirkin and I think a Mustang of some sort. He's got a bunch of things going on. Oh, Jesse was in the middle of the yin yang. He also did that. So anyway, I'm looking through the build feed, and there's a bunch. A couple of them are doing foam cut wings, like a hot wire cut. One of them is doing a P47 that's printed, 3D printed. So it's very on topic. Yeah. Trying some different techniques. It's really cool. It's really cool to see everybody kind of trying a bunch of different things. Those are the people that are on the Discord in our FT Build-ruary build chat. And then of course there's a bunch of people online on the FT forums. So that's been going good and fun, and it's been busy. And I'm technically 3 planes to the good, because I have attempted flight and had very limited success with the RC version of Long Easy. I have a small video to show how many times I've attempted to get that bird into the air with terrible success. I've also had, in the short time it's been out, I've had a handful of comments from different FT flyers who told me like I couldn't get that bird going either. There's something off with that thing. And a lot of them are suggesting it's probably the thrust angle, maybe. So we'll see. I've got 2 more chuckers that I can turn RC to see if I can get it working. I'll definitely give a dissertation on how to get it flying if I could figure it out. Today I took out the Special K again, and I had the replace the props, and I got them going. I have the bigger servos on there, the 17-gram servos. They work well. I was able to do full tilt flying, so it was aggressive, unlimited vertical, doing loops and some rolls, and the servos did not fail. I got into a dive and I was able to pull out, thankfully.
Nice.
It's like, this is what happened last time, and I'm like, no, I was able to get out. So that worked out great. I've got the B2 plans moving. They're not quite cut out yet, but I'm thinking Saturday morning I'm going to keep going at those. I cut out an F-117 Nighthawk. I saw, so some guy put together a video where he made it out of cardboard or something like that. So I'm like, we could probably make this out of foam and have a lot better success. He did it as a prop and slot. And that seems to be what the plans are. I'm like, I've got a 64 millimeter EDF. Doesn't have a home yet. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put it in that plane. Now I'm going to plumb it up, and that the intakes are going to lead to the EDF, and then the exits are going to come out the back like it's supposed to. With any luck, I'll get it flying.
Okay.
And then the other thing that I've been doing is, a couple weeks ago, I can't even remember when. About a full week before Valentine's Day. Actually, while I was gone, or right before I left for Idaho on my business trip, I ordered one of those little foam planes that are like the FTEZ, like the freighter, I think is what they have, but there's a million different versions of it. She's a jet lady. She's always enjoyed fighter jets. So I picked up an F-22. It's not quite her first pick bird, but it's right up there with all the other ones. So I picked up one of those, and it comes with lights, and it's got a stabilizer and all that kind of stuff. So I said, well, this should be easy. It's just a simple 2-channel deal. Throttle makes it go. If you go faster, throttle goes up. The lower throttle goes down. You got to play with it and balance it. And then the left and the right, it helps do the turning. So she only has to concentrate on a couple things at once. It gets her familiar with the left and right transfer that has to happen in your brain.
Right.
Once that's good, you've got it. So that's usually the first step. And that's actually a really good trainer for those two things. Kind of balancing that your speed, your throttle at any given trim set should give you should either cause it to lift or cause it to lower. That's exactly how the full scale that guys fly. And then, getting left and right straight in your brain and also having a lot of success. Her first flight was at dusk, but thankfully she put the lights on smart. So she had one of the LEDs on the LED strip on the side, and the rest were on the underside, kind of front edge of the wing.
Okay.
On both sides. So when it was flying sideways, you could see one LED. Right.
Okay.
And when it was pointing up, when you're looking a little bit on the underside, you could see the V shape of the wings. And when you couldn't see anything, but it was a silhouette, you could see that it was at least a fighter jet, and you could see it, but you couldn't really tell much about it. But if you could see a light, you could tell either you're looking at the side or the bottom. So you could tell up, down, and left and right, which is essentially all you need. So she was able to fly around at dusk really successfully. She managed to keep it very close to her within the paved section the low cut section of the field, which was fun. Her son really enjoyed it, and her daughter was really excited about it as well. So I think she's looking to pick up something like that for her kids, to have them be able to fly it. And I told her, I said, this thing's really durable. And because of that, she should fear a little less, to at least giving him have a shot with a little bit of supervision. And also, either because my son saw her and her kids have success with that, Logan brought out the little yellow Cessna. I think we're cleaning out his older brother's room, and he had this same kind of setup with the easy pusher kind of twin motor. And he pulled that out. He's like, hey, can we fly this? So just made sure the batteries were good and, powered it up, and he starts flying it like it's nobody's business. And I just let him. First time we kind of talked about it where I gave him direction. This time I just said, I'll be your spotter. And he just took off and he flew around, and he lost it the once in the backfield, and I just kind of kept him online, and he found it. He's like, oh, thanks a lot. Without you, I don't know that I would have found it. I'm like, yeah, probably not, but that's how it usually is. I said, that's the reason why you have a spotter with you when you go flying. There's somebody there to help watch out for other birds that might be flying at your head. And the other half is, if you go down, that they keep your line so that you can find your bird quick. So, and we exercised that today. He kind of let the wind take his plane away for a little while, and those little birds, they get carried away quite easily. And rather than, I guess, let it down, he just sort of kept flying. And I'm like, I'm having a hard time seeing this. You might want to let it down while we can see it. So So we had a lot of fun today. We've had a lot of fun past handful of times we've gotten out. Flying the Special K again is really fun. It was dusk, so I actually was realizing I was having a hard time seeing it. The underside of the Special K looks a lot like a clear blue sky. That's when it's all kind of dim and dark out there, I was like, I should bring this in. Because you can't always see the top, and it's a flying wing, so going away or from or coming to you, it's pretty thin. It disappears. So it's been busy, I guess is what I'm saying. It's been incredibly busy, but it's also been a lot of trials and success and just a lot of joy in seeing this hobby flourish with not just my son, which that would be rewarding enough. And having him come, like today, he was playing a video game and I said, hey, I'm about to go get your brother. Do you want to grab your plane? And we could probably fly at the school, right after we pick him up. And he was kind of like, oh, no, you go. And then about halfway, I picked his brother up, and then about almost all halfway back, he called me on the phone. He's like, is it still enough time for you to fly? I'm like, yeah, just barely. When I get home, get your stuff, get it ready. So then when I come home, you just jump in the car and we'll go. And that's essentially what we did. So it's been fun, and it's been great to see Amy, who's always had an interest in flight, just in general, really because she's building her own plane, right? She's building the Mini Scout, I think. That's not the one, but it's pretty close. It's the mid-wing one.
I don't know.
It's okay. I can't remember it right now, but anyway, she's building one of those. It's almost done. I think we'll be able to finish it up this weekend. But she's had the F-22 to fly and get comfortable and get confident. And I know she's going to pass that along to at least her daughter, if not her son, in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's just cool to see that kind of grow. And if you ever get the chance to help somebody with that, I've got a neighbor who keeps also saying, hey man, I'm free on this day, or I'm free on this day. Do you think? And of course, the last couple of times he said that is the day it's like downpouring, it's like, well, that's not going to work. But one of these days coming up real soon here, we're going to get an opportunity to take that big flying wing, take the Kraken out and have him just see what it's about and probably enjoy the hobby a little bit. And if I'm smart, I'll make sure I have the buddy box ready so I can say, yeah, it's okay. Like take it out, see what you can do with it. I'll probably get myself a glider ready so that I can just put him up in the sky and say, look, you can only do so much to this thing. It's a glider. It'll be okay. And I've got you if it doesn't. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that all grows over the next couple months. I'm building planes right now that are excellent for combat, like using the FPV combat systems.
Okay.
Where we're each flying from our plane and we're shooting each other down out of the sky, literally with an electronic sensor that detects when you're getting hit. And then it's immobilizing or kind of making your plane twitch and stuff. So yeah, that should be a lot of fun. So my son and I are progressively building to that. So I'm hoping we can get that ready by the end of the time they go to their mothers over the summer. I'm hoping we get a couple attempts. So yeah, been busy.
Yeah.
Busy couple weeks.
Well, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
One of us has to be anyway.
I don't have to be, but yeah, that's nice. Build-ruary is always, like February is always stupid busy with the hobby for me because I set up this silly challenge. So let's move on, I guess, to the community. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's been going on. Our community's really been incredibly active. If you're not part of the Discord channel and you just want to be talking to people who are actively building and who are eager to see you have success with your planes and see what you're working on, this is a pretty good Discord channel to have those discussions. I mean, we're not the only one, I'm sure, but it's a really good group of guys, and I'm pleased to associate with everybody who comes on and helps kind of build that up.
Yeah, and I like, and we've said it before, that the community is largely self-moderated at this point.
Mhm.
And it's self-contained. Because I don't have the time that I once did to watch it and be in there all the time. So no, I've not been watching, to answer your question. But anytime I look in there and just kind of scroll through some recent messages, it's all friendly, it's all good. So
Mhm.
that's still good to see.
Yep, absolutely. I think people are taking I'll call it the continuation of the flight test family friendly model and continuing that spirit, which is exactly what we want here. So thank you everybody for doing that. Speaking of, we talked about build parties. It is another Build-ruary build party. But if you are just building or just want to hang out with people, talk planes, you don't have to be in the Build-ruary contest to join our build party, really. I'm going to be on Saturday. That would be, that'd be like 2 days from now in the morning. Probably when this airs, just afterwards. So 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., 12 noon. So I'm going to be in there building more stuff, and look for me throughout the week. Honestly, as the week goes on, it gets more and more desperate to get planes completed so I could have a good day to bring them out and fly them in the air. As I think everybody who's working on these projects are trying. And there's also word that Flying Tiger, our buddy Tony, who comes on to almost all the build nights, he's in most of them, at least for a little while. He's looking to start a challenge on the FT forums that will kind of dovetail quite nicely into at the end of Build-ruary, which I think any modeler has a reason to join in. And that's basically kind of a complete your build challenge.
Okay.
For all those people who have that project that they just haven't finished, and all Joe has to do is look at everything behind me and see the collection of builds that are most of the way there. I'm sure you've got a bunch of those on your own. So have one of those kind of picked out and join Tony. We'll post it when he makes it live. He's working on a lot of the details. But most of it's just bragging rights and to really be part of a community who can egg you on into finishing that project that you just wish you wish you did and you never quite got back to. So with that, I know we're going to talk about 3D printed planes. We talked about a number of companies, and I know I'm going to miss a bunch. So please keep them coming if you have a list of plane companies. But a friend of mine who was in one of the early Build-ruaries, Dr. Looping Louie, his name is Tristen. He's a German guy who went to school for aeronautics, I think. And I think he's actually switched his major to something else. But he still is in love with flight and building planes. And so he has actually started his own company doing 3D modeling of planes. Now he's got one that's it's called the Startup, which is like kind of a scout, kind of pusher type plane. And that's a free model. And then he's got a 1/16th scale glider of the DFS Habich E, which is a 1930 style German glider from way back. And it's 2+ meters, almost 7 feet wingspan. And it's only held together with like 1 meter carbon fiber tubes. And the rest is 3D printed.
I feel like if that's supposed to be a German name, that you're doing is supposed to be a hard K.
Habich. I think he called it.
There's no R.
CHT. Habich. I'm sorry. Did I say Harbich?
Yeah.
Sorry. That's an anime drawback. My mistake. Nothing. Whatever. We won't get into that. Either way, but yeah, it's a DFSH Habich. Like a habit, basically. Habit E. Okay. Anyway, so we'll have a link to that in the show notes as well as his website and a link to get to the Startup if you want. He's got a bunch of foamy plans that I remember him developing on the flight test forums. He's got the plans available. If I understand it, I think they're free. He's always had them available on the FT forums for free. So I don't. I've built about half of them, and they all fly really well. Some of them are a little touchy, but he has a really good understanding of how flight works. So That's pretty cool. So that's yet another plane, a 3D plane designer manufacturer that you can go to. He's got about 3 models right now, but we talked for a little while. He's been working on a bunch. So go take a look at his website, see what you think. Print out a plane, see, and let us know what you think if you build one. We'd love to hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last little bit of community, and I've read through this briefly, and I'm going to read it out loud. Maybe not. I don't know. So the FAA has changed the way they said, hey, you guys are community-based organizations. Congratulations. You're now a CBO. You need to designate all the individual spots for us to designate it as a FRIA. So you do all the work and we just sort of approve it. And they have a set form and there's a bunch of other stuff. And it has changed because they thought that they would just be able to provide a couple GPS coordinates and just let the FAA do the rest, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that the workload is not on the FAA, of course. And so I'm going to read the letter that I received the other day, and it's from the Flight Test Community Association, but it's not the first, I'll call it gripe and argument. I know Bruce from New Zealand, who's the ex-jet, so he kind of shouts out about, he keeps a tab on the regulations because they come around to us anyway. Whatever you do in America or England, chances are our area is going to adopt it. So it's really important. So
now, real quick, was this a members only letter or was this a FTCA public letter?
It got sent out to all the members. I don't know. They also had a YouTube video that touched on a lot of these same points. Okay. So, I mean, maybe I
just want to make sure we're in the clear on that.
As I understand it, they may not have all the information here, but basically they kind of indicate that this is, they're really disappointed. I mean, we could sum it up with basically they're really disappointed with how the FAA is handling FRIAs and remote ID, and that it's not really going in a way that's promoting the hobby, promoting the starting point for most people for their love of aviation, right? And they're just really disappointed. They said that we're going to obviously continue to fight the good fight and try to change the minds, but they're really not sure. They're not really sure how much they're going to be able to continue to be compliant. I mean, right now they are. They're going to do everything that they're asked to do. But what the FAA is asking them to do, which is basically, it's just the things I guess they've been talking about behind closed doors. It's clear that the FAA is not interested in the future of recreational modeling. And, they talk about how there's already a shortage of pilots and mechanics and aviation specialists and people who are interested in doing all the aviation jobs. Well, guess what? It's not going to get any better if you cut out the little league, right? That feeds into the AAA league, which, eventually makes pilots and, professional mechanics and all that kind of stuff that help run the industry that keeps people flying through the air quick.
Right.
So, that's what the letter, I mean, it's just really, they're really disappointed. They said that they're not interested in propping up their interests. The FTC is not interested in propping up their own thing. What they're worried about is the hobby overall. As they move forward in their fight against unnecessary regulations that are being imposed on us, we will be honorable and respectful, but we will not let the agendas of others go unnoticed and unaddressed. So basically, they're going to start standing up and shouting on rooftops to get people to notice that this isn't okay. Like, this isn't what we need. And that they basically said, they're asking for us to continue to support them more than ever, and join the fight and becoming an aircrew member. Basically, kind of get involved and be willing to stand up and put your voice out there to support the future of the hobby. And just kind of reach out to them and let them know, offer anything you might be able to kind of help them with. Maybe it's kind of like, hey, have we thought about doing this? Or, I know about this, and maybe we could try this avenue or something. I don't know. So they're kind of asking for help. They're also just letting us know that what's going on, they're not okay with, and that it's time to not just go along, but it's time to do something about it and get your voice to be heard. Bruce from Exit is like that time was long ago. We missed that boat a while back, but there's a lot of people, even from like the British organization, the CAA, I think is what it's called. And they're having the same kind of issue, where they're basically getting told what to do. And it's basically saying, yeah, by the way, we don't really care what you're going to do. We're going to tell you that you really can't do what you want. We're going to do what's best to make us the most money is what it seems. That's my personal take on it. Or it's just, we were mandated to do this, and it's by people who don't care whether or not there's a hobby. They care about controlling the airspace for safety or whatever. Anyway.
Which, oh man, is a bit tough. Controlling granted, we don't get extremely high in what we do.
Right, you mean above the earth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we shouldn't, whatever we do should not be interfering with full-scale aviation.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying that because maybe not everybody's paid attention to the news in the last week, the national news in the last 2-3 weeks. And certainly outside the country, outside the United States, folks may not be aware that we had a Chinese balloon fly across our country. And then since that was shot down, we've had basically our country has retuned its radar, and we're seeing more devices in civilian airspace that things just have to be investigated. So it's entirely possible we're going to see even stronger stuff coming down the pipeline.
Right. What we need to do is come up with a low-cost, effective way to get rid of balloons, such as those that airplanes can't fly up to, because they're in a special spot in the stratosphere that is too thin for most aircraft to get up to.
Sure, but it's not even the stratosphere level. It's what's flying. So the one was, yes, up at like 80,000 feet. The others are more in the 35,000, 40,000 feet range. The others have been shot down that are detecting. Yeah, it's more in civilian aircraft levels. Specifically airliners. And so that is space. There's talks about what these could be. I don't expect to know anything about them for a while. But this is the elevation that various civilian, private, even other national entities could be flying at and be flying perfectly fine. Or navigating. I won't say flying because these things are more hovering than anything.
Right, they are.
But
apparently they can control what elevation they're at. And by doing so, they catch different winds, and they can technically kind of somewhat control themselves. It's in a weird, slower manner maybe, but they have onboard systems to control where they go.
Well,
some of them do.
So if you're steering yourself in that manner, then it's a lot less onboard equipment needed to propel the craft. But what I'm getting at is we're having a lot of that in our airspace right now. And while the main things, we had one shot down, and then we've had 3 very rapidly thereafter shot down. And President Biden's come out, and they're going to be reanalyzing or re-looking at our airspace and what's in it and what's allowed to be in it. And they're looking to crack down even further. So I don't know necessarily how that's going to bleed down into our hobby, but I would not be surprised to see things tighten down even harder, in this because of it.
It's right. Which is disheartening.
That was a long,
no, that's
long
okay.
trail to get there.
I heard about the one that went over, I guess over Chicago or whatever, was brought down by a like $3.5 million. It's like $35,000 implement shot down by a $3.5 million piece of equipment, including the missile. Right? It's like, whatever. If that was the goal, to drive us bankrupt through the equipment we use, then.
Well, to be fair, it was up at 80,000 feet. So.
No, but again, what a great way to bankrupt a country. You just send a bunch of balloons, and after a while, it's just like, well, you eventually run out of money. Anyway, it's either way. It's not pretty, and it means, it's iffy stuff for the hobby at the moment. It ultimately, right now, we pay attention. We stand up and let our voice heard. At least that it matters to us. Because there's things that seem pretty innocuous on our end where you're like, this, there should be a place for people to explore this avenue of interest, as it's something we need as a country for an industry that is critical to defending our country, right? If we want people who are really good at it and understand it and are interested in diving into it, we need to get them excited early. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is to have them have avenues to do so. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but at the same point, I'm doing STEM nights and stuff. So what do you expect? And on that vein, I just happened to speak to Sam from the HRC, and he said that he's basically suspending development of airplane kits, partly due to sales, but a big part of it is the ambiguity with what's legal and what's not with the newer regulations. And as they continue to
knowledge he want to put out?
He let it out to me. He made it quite clear that I'm done. I don't know what level how long he's going to stay out. Right now he's concentrating on a different vector. He's concentrating on RC crawlers and things like that. Mm. And it's doing pretty well for his business. So I'll see that he continue. He still has his kits that he sells. He's certainly, at least that are available. I don't know how long that's going to stay. I imagine he may have plans available for free. If you want to download, he might still have those available. As he in his heart, he loves aviation. That's really why he started this business. So we'll see where that goes. But for right now, I'm disappointed to say that, like many other owners of businesses that are hinged on aviation, model aviation, these regulations are making a lot of them kind of rethink what they're doing and how long that's going to be a viable source.
I guess
of business.
I don't want to make light of it, but he does have the benefit that he already has the laser. So he can keep going with what he's already developed until such a time as they require manufacturers like him to ship RFID with it, or what's
whatever.
Whatever
remote ID.
Is.
Yeah,
remote ID. There it is.
It's RID or it's remote frequency or you had it right. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. He's, that's with the caveat is free to change his mind, and when he does, we'll be happy to let people know about it when he does. He's been a good friend of the show, and he's a good guy in our book. So, with that, I guess that kind of brings us from the hate back to the love. This past week was Valentine's Day, and I thought we might have a special guest on the show today, but I misinterpreted a conversation that had been had, and that's okay. But it has definitely been a Valentine's Day, and you know what? There is a small brief history of using aviation to express one's love to another during Valentine's Day. I mean, if you remember back to grade school, there's a like 40 or 50 different old Valentines of various ilk, professing your Valentine's love. Let's see. I jet propelled this Valentine's. What does that say? I'm jet propelled for you, Valentine. I'm plane crazy about you, with hearts and a plane, like from the cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have I hope you'll fly at the chance to be mine. And then it basically says, how about it, with a big heart, and it says, wear it on a button, little thing to kind of have a bunch of wings, little pocket.
Some of these are old.
I mean, they're old. Old. We're talking old. There's another one. It's like they've got the not the Wright Flyer, but an early flyer of that era, like 1900, before 1910, kind of deal. And it says, to my Valentine, Cupid's stolen my heart, which he brings to you. And it shows Cupid on this old early model with a little puppy or two in the background, a little tricycle geared, pusher glider. And then, of course, you could get somebody to skywrite hearts to your love. You can always do that. And a lot of people who are prone to throw themselves at the ground without any propulsion other than gravity, they go parachuting and skydiving, and they'll take their love and profess their love to each other on the way down to the ground.
Well, don't forget the guys that or ladies can do it as well, but they'll have like when they're down at the beach, and they'll have the planes fly the long banners behind them.
Yeah. The message boards, the little advertising. Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple great videos on how they pick those up and carry them through and put them back down. So there's a bunch of stuff, and there's a little video of a pilot from Qatar Airlines and about his love story of aviation. So, in that theme of aviation and love, I know I've fallen in love with it. It's kind of invaded my life, whether I like it or not. I just walk around my house, plane in every room. Not quite anymore, but it's a journey to get into there.
Well, see, now you got yourself a lady who will feed that addiction, so it's going to be a problem.
It's going to be a big problem. It will and it won't. We'll see where it goes. It'll be fun.
More will than won't.
I know. It'll be fun. We're going to enjoy it, I think, either which way you shake it. So, yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. All right. So I think that brings us around to our main topic, I think, right?
Yeah.
Which we're gonna pass off to Joe. What is our main topic today?
We're going to talk about 3D printing. And before we get into it, I'm going to go grab a drink real quick.
All right.
We can dive into it proper.
I'm going to go get another drink as well.
Nice. Well, now that we both have drinks to wet our whistles with, let's talk about 3D printing. And I want to, again, this is speaking from the perspective of somebody who owns only, I should say, the Creality Ender 3. It's the only 3D printer I've got. It's the only 3D printer I've worked with, and I am also an amateur. We talk about 3D printing a fair bit. I've done some 3D printing, but I've still not gotten the first plane fully printed. I have done some printing things that have turned out well, and many things that have turned out poorly, which is part of why I wanted to talk about this, so that I could kind of go over the issues that I've had. Matthew, you can bring up issues you've had or ask me about anything that sounds like it might be related to a problem you've had, and I can kind of, based on my experience, and, again, by far not great at this. So far, I'm still in the involvement and the understanding where this is a love-hate relationship with the printer. And I think you said that Richard Spitfire was considering doing a 3D printer podcast.
Yep, Spitfire 76. He's playing around with it, trying to figure out how he's going to get it done. He has a distinct interest, and he's had a great deal of success with the needle printer or the needle cutter, and he's obviously had good success with 3D printing. He has something that I apparently am nearly incapable of, which is a determined focus. Which I've just now in my life started to come to terms with. That may just be not something I possess anymore.
Moving on.
Not in great quantity.
So, if when Richard ever gets that up and running, we're going to be telling you about that because we want that to be as successful for him as possible. And Richard has been doing more with the 3D printers than I have, so he'll be a better source of knowledge when that comes about. But in the meantime, this is what you got. 3D printing, what is it? From a simple point, it is printing very thin layers of plastic in layer after layer after layer to form an object. They can be printed solid, they can be printed hollow, they can be printed as a percentage of infill to give them varying degrees of internal strength or structure or weight. But at the end of the day, there is code that is fed into the machine that says, here's the shape of each layer, and each layer, say, it'd be like if you drew an outline of the thing that you were wanting to do, that you were wanting to make. And each layer had its own outline. You just built it layer by layer by layer. And these layers are anywhere from I think mine goes like 0.16 or 0.1 millimeter. And I think I can go up to like 0.4 millimeter. I don't know if I can do 0.4 millimeter on a layer thickness. That'd be really thick.
You could. I mean, there's a way to do it. You have a nozzle big enough and the printer is capable. Mm-hmm. It may not be simple to do.
That'd be an ugly print.
Well, if you're looking for a prototype, and especially if you're doing a larger print set where you're using most of the volume of your printer, that's going to make a big difference in time.
In print time, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you want to pump out an idea pretty quick and test if it fits and works, that's going to be important. Yeah,
because I've definitely increased layer height to decrease print time. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I printed was a holster for my pistol. Mm-hmm. It turns out that a guy that I was going to go visit for the weekend had a pistol of a very, very similar fitting. And so it would have fit the holster. And so I printed a quick one that had a thick layer height. And when I say layer height, that's specifically the height of those individual layers. Mm-hmm. So a thicker layer height will result in fewer layers needed to be done to get it to do it. So it's not quite a 1-to-1, I imagine, but every time you double the layer height, so instead of a 0.1 layer height, you're at a 0.2, you've cut your print time not exactly, but in general, roughly in half. Because there's other things that go into that process that's involved in that. But when we say layer height, that's what we're talking about. And for higher quality, thinner layer height, generally ideal, but much higher print times. But I printed a large layer height version for myself, and then printed a smaller layer height version for him. Once I knew that the print was good and the gun fit and everything, I was like, okay. So I printed him the nice one.
Nice.
Yeah. And yeah, it was the difference of, a couple hours, like 2 hours on a thick print to like all night for the high quality print. So yeah, layer height. Parts. There are a ton of parts we could talk about with this, but we'll try to narrow it down to sort of the big ones. You've got your bed. That's the actual print bed. That's where your print is placed. Some beds move. Mine does. Some folks' extruder and nozzle move about the bed. My bed moves forward and back, and then the nozzle goes left, right, and up, down. To my knowledge, all 3D printer beds are heated. I don't know of any cold ones. That was a question. I said 3D printer beds, as far as I know, they're all heated. I don't know of any cold beds.
There's some really minor ones, like small ones that may not have a heated bed. Most of them are, though.
I should also say we're specifically talking about PLA printing.
Yep, PLA printing. We're not talking about sintering. There's a bunch of different technologies. You can print food, you can print organs, you can print, or at least print biotech stuff, which ends up, I think, being cells.
Yeah, they've got metal 3D printing now.
Yep, that's a laser sintering the metal. So basically, they have powder that they put on as a level, and then they run lasers that 2 or 3 of them will basically superheat a thing and weld it to the lower layer or sinter. And then they will do that at all the spots that are above the next layer, where the next layer is. And then they screen off another layer to go on top of the metal, and they kind of keep it level, and they keep doing that. And then eventually you have your fused metal part in the midst loose, like metal or sand, basically. But it's metal bits.
All right. So you got your heated bed that can be level adjusted. We can talk about leveling in a bit. Stepper motors. Stepper motors are high accuracy motors that, I won't say stepper motors don't track their position, but they track the steps that they take. And a step is one click of the motor. So you take your brushless motor, and you turn it, and you feel it kind of grab in spots. That's the magnets inside interacting and grabbing, and you kind of feel like tick, tick, tick. The same way that those motors are spun, very similar as how a stepper motor is advanced, but the number of those tick, tick, tick in a single rotation is extremely high. Each step is very small, and stepper motor technology goes way back. And it's what made the old 3.5 diskettes and the floppy drives possible. Was the ability to incrementally, in very small amounts, step a motor, which drove a corkscrew gear to advance something laterally.
Right. If you've got like the fine threaded motor, I think each turn is 1/32 of an inch. And with that, if you know how many percentages of that rotation, you can determine exactly how far you've moved something forward or back.
And so you've got, let's take my guys here. So my stepper motors drive a rubber belt. So each step kind of moves that bed forward and back a little bit or side, but the amount that it can move is so tiny that, I mean, you saw it, you were saying it was more in my 3D printer, but the wood grain in basically a smooth plastic surface, is how minuscule these movements can be. And I go into the detail of that just to stepper motors are impressive.
Yep. I mean, we're getting, you can get layer heights in fractions of a millimeter, very small fractions of a millimeter.
Yep. Extruder assembly. Oh, I should say stepper motors, high torque, but they are not like infinite torque. So they can start skipping, which I've had mine skip in the extruder when I was experiencing heat creep, which I can talk about later. Extruder assembly, for mine, that's basically the whole head that swings out over the bed and prints. That involves the extruder motor, the Bowden tube, Bowden, Bowden tube, the hot end, and the nozzle, and all the fans attached to that. All that's basically the extruder assembly. The Bowden tube is the plastic tube that, for mine, because I'm not a direct drive, I think
I was going to say
correct term.
There are two major types, I guess, of Cartesian coordinate printers, and that's the Bowden tube, which is moving the stepper motor that moves the filament in and out away from the actual print head that moves back and forth, and connecting that with the tube. Or you can direct drive where that stepper motor that moves the filament in and out is directly on the nozzle that moves back and forth. And that's the main difference. And of course you get, and the goal and the hope of either of those methods is to get more accurate, smoother prints.
And there's pros and cons to both.
Yes, there are.
Which I'm not going to go into because I didn't prep that.
I can talk about it briefly. It's about inertia. So when you have your stepper motor moving things back and forth, the more it weighs, the more inertia that item has to overcome the power of the stopped stepper and to shift it a little bit left or a little bit right, causing slight inaccuracies or wearing down maybe the belts or anything like that. So then there becomes a little bit more play. If there's any play, it will definitely push the edges of that play. So the inertia makes a big difference. It also creates vibrations in the device that aren't there if the Bowden tube is. So if the printer stepper motor is static and sitting on the frame itself, it doesn't move back and forth and it doesn't create vibration. So only the little bit of inertia on the print head is moving back and forth. That has less effort or puts less force into the frame to try and create a vibration. The vibrations are what causes inaccuracies in the prints. So if you're trying to eliminate vibrations and movement that is outside of the desired movements.
Right. And so the direct drive, your extruder stepper motor is physically part of that extruder hot end area.
Head
right.
Mess.
Which
means, you don't have any play between the stepper motor. You have very little play between the stepper motor on the filament and the head that it melts through and pushes out.
Because the distance is very short and there's not twisting and curving that goes on, which will happen with the Bowden tube, and I'll talk about that in a second. Whereas mine being having the Bowden tube, my stepper motor is mounted to the upright part of the frame. So like you said, it's not. And that's where the Bowden tube comes in, which is the hollow plastic tube that channels and guides the filament from the extruder stepper motor. So the motor pushes it through that tube, and that tube turns and guides the filament down to the hot end. And then as that extruder motor pushes and pulls on it, pull is the retraction. That's what helps stop the print between spots as it's moving and relocating. And exactly. I think that's the major parts.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that sort of hits on the main things to know.
And don't underestimate the frame itself. Usually it's extruded aluminum 20 by 20 or 40 by 20 with V. You get the rollers. They're like V-shaped typically to sit in the grooves of that extrusion. Although there are a number of different mechanisms to do so. And there are also different sliders that go. So there's like you said, the rubber chain that moves the print head back and forth, but it rides it along a steel shaft. That shaft has a bearing that rolls, and depending on the type of bearing, you're going to get different friction and different sound. So I've seen roller bearings, but I've also seen this. It's like a plastic material. It makes almost no noise. It's amazing, and it's solid, and it doesn't. There's very little play. Where some of the ball bearings have a little bit of play because you need a little bit of space for the rollers to roll. Right. Anyway, you can get into all of these have rabbit holes that go way deep. So I'll just leave that as a caveat for the rest of this.
There are tons of mods and customizations and replacement parts and this parts, but there's a lot that can be done.
Two other main pieces, which are probably nothing you typically get into, but the power pack or the
power supply
transformer. That can be pretty important to make sure that it's sized appropriately for the machine. Usually the manufacturer does that. Sometimes they get a little aggressive with it. I know on the ANET A8, they recommended that you actually change that for a little bit higher power source with a better fault control with like an actual power switch. Because it's just like, no, you just turn the printer on and that's
in
cool.
The early days.
Like, oh, like, yeah, well, it's in the beginning, right? So, and then the other thing to go with that is the interface screen. Some of them now are color and touch and all that stuff, but the early ones were very small LCD screens with like a roller and a click, and that was it to go through the menu system. So,
well, that's all mine is, just a turn knob and a push in.
That's all you really need, because most of the time what you're selecting is what temperature you're going to put the things at if it's not right in the file, and then which file you want to print. For the most part, that's, there's some other troubleshooting items, but for the most part, you don't need a whole lot. But depending on the printer, it may be a feature you want to look at.
And I should clarify and say there are way more parts we could talk about.
Yeah, I know, but those are
motherboards,
big
control
pieces.
boards, stepper motor drivers, wire harnesses. But in the interest of how I'm approaching this one and talking about it,
right? We're not going to focus on those things.
We've covered the main parts.
We just wanted you to know those are the main things. Like you said, stepper motor. Okay. Surprisingly, stepper motor drivers make a big difference in the amount of noise. It's crazy. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the big piece of why we're doing this is the filament that gets pushed through this nozzle to melt, right?
Yeah.
What goes through there?
So walking into this, I said, okay, there's like 3 types getting ready for this.
Like I said, you are limiting it purely to just PLA.
Just PLA. And I said, there's like 3 PLAs. There might be 1 or 2 more that I'm not aware of. Boy, was I wrong. Just looking. So you've got your regular PLA, your PLA Plus, which is tough PLA. I didn't really know about tough PLA. It's just tougher. It's harder.
Is it? Some of them have carbon in it.
Not that one.
Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
You've got your lightweight PLA, which is like what, pre-foamed or something. So
no, it's superheated and it foams as it comes out. So it actually creates air bubbles and it expands as it comes out of the nozzle.
Okay. So it's the same print, roughly half the weight. You've got flexible PLA, which you can use for 3D printing the tires. And then those are your main ones, but then getting into some fun stuff, you can get, of course, colored PLA. So I've only really printed in black so far. But you can get the different color PLAs. They have 3D printers that can handle multiple colored filaments at the same time and change which filament is printing during the print at different points. Mine doesn't do that, but they are out there. There is silk-like PLA.
That stuff is pretty.
I hadn't seen that, but it is. Now, I've seen a picture of it now, getting ready for this, but I hadn't seen it before this.
Oh, I printed something. It was silver. It was some of the parts of the tank, and it was with the silk PA, and this looks so good.
Yeah,
it's so good.
The idea is that when it's done, it looks like it's wrapped in silk.
But it will show off every defect. It will highlight it. Think of it almost like a glossy surface almost. So it highlights all the deformities.
Concerned about deformities and problems in your print? Well, next up we have glitter PLA to bedazzle and amaze and take away from those problems. Glitter PLA. Glitters mixed in with the PLA.
Yeah, simple as that.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I would be concerned about additional clogging issues.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of questions I have about that one, but at the same point, if you're one of the products that people use this for is printing shoes. Right, you can scan your feet and have somebody build a custom shoe for you, or design a file for you to print at home. And if you're the kind who likes your shoes to sparkle, this is a perfect filament for you. I'm just saying.
It's an airplane podcast, Matthew.
If you want your pilots to sparkle.
Okay. Or if you want them to change colors. There's color changing PLA. They can basically one color and then change to another based on heat or UV radiation.
The cup I have is made of that material. It
Nice.
turns like a purpley color, and it's green otherwise. And when it gets cold, it turns purple.
There is a wood PLA.
Mm-hmm. And it stains just like wood.
It has wood fibers in it.
Mm-hmm.
So you print it, you sand it down. You can sand it down. You get a bit of the wood grain going on. Yeah, it's got wood fiber in it. Stain it. Metal PLA, not metallic, because they have metallic colors, but actual metal PLA. And in this case, they have mixed in basically metal dust, metal particles in with the PLA, as much as like a 50-50 mixture. So anytime you're going with one of these hybrids, my suggestion would be on the lookout for clogging. And then as the wood, maybe you may not have to be too concerned about. I don't know, not a professional opinion. But definitely the metal and the next one, carbon fiber. I would suggest changing nozzles if you're still using the soft brass nozzles and going to stainless steel nozzles.
Yeah, they have different materials that are different hardnesses.
Yeah, go to a harder nozzle that's not going to wear so easily. I'm still using the brass nozzles.
So the benefit of the brass nozzle is that they transfer heat better or quicker.
Okay.
They're more conductive, but they're softer metals. So if you have a fiber, an impregnated filament that has different kinds of fibers, there's a strong fiber which tends to have carbon filaments in it. That will wear out your nozzle pretty quick. So, be cognizant of what you're doing.
And to your point, there's a carbon fiber PLA that has carbon fiber in it.
Yep, chopped up little bits of carbon fiber.
Yep, very small, but it's there, and it does help improve the strength of the parts that it's printing. There's glow in the dark PLA. There is conductive PLA.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely doesn't take the place of a circuit board, but capable of running some electricity through it. How much? I don't know. I didn't do that much. I just saw it and I said, huh. I
It
double
might be
checked.
good to be able to use to print like a conductive touch surf, like on-off switch kind of deal where I don't know what it might be used for, but that sounds like something.
Basically, a low, good, a low current something that if you were, I guess, especially useful if you have like the multi extruder or multi filament extruders where it can
Mhm.
rotate between, and you've got a
Yep.
spot that you would want to run a wire, but it's like in the
And,
middle of the model. That's not going to be easy to run the wire. Then you can
right.
just print this
Mhm.
conductive PLA through the product or through your
Yep.
model. But again, I would imagine, I don't know all the specs on how much load it can take and how much current and all that it can take, but it's not going to be much.
Okay. I didn't know that it was
I
there.
don't imagine. So,
Cool.
high temp PLA. So this would be basically regular PLA, but designed for higher temp environments, where regular PLA, like I'm using, would begin to soften. And I think the term was glassified, deglassified. There's a term for it, but about 55 degrees Celsius is when regular PLA begins to, I guess, begins to soften, begins to kind of lose what its
Mhm.
rigidity and can be deformed. High temp PLA then will head on up, I think, to like 100 degrees Celsius before that begins happening.
Okay.
And then translucent PLA,
I have
which
that.
is semi-transparent.
Yep. It's really awesome for printing the 3D planes and you want to see the interior structure and kind of highlight it. It's also good if you're going to, let's say, design a small, maybe not a headlight, but if you're looking for a diffusing light of some sort, where if you have your directional left right lights and a strobe, you don't need it to go out forever. You're not looking for it to be a clear headlight to actually light up the ground. You just need to be able to see that it's glowing. That's a perfect way to print out small little lights that you need. That filament is perfect for that.
I will not claim that to be an exhaustive list of PLA types.
No.
If you know of any more, go ahead, Matt.
As far as PLAs, usually when you go into when you're looking for different properties, because PLA tends to be, generally speaking, fairly strong. It tends to melt if it's in direct sunlight for a long while or caught in a car. It might start to soften enough where it's going to deform just a hair. That's why a lot of people are kind of like, well, I don't really want to print my planes because I like to keep my planes in the car for a long while and let it
Mm-hmm.
melt or whatever. I mean, that's the kind of melt that'll soften up your hot glue, right? It's that kind of, but there are other filaments if you want different properties. Like TPU is a flexible filament. It's more like a rubberized thing. A lot of people make their camera mounts and things like that for their quadcopters, or for FPV, they'll put it in that because it flexes before it breaks, like a lot. PVC, while it does give off some toxic gases, like tiny bits of that, so you want to have an exhaust nearer your printers to be able to take that away from if you're using it indoors. Some people just have it in their garage, but PVC has a much higher melting point, so it can handle higher heats. So if you're putting a piece around electronic that gets hot, that might be, and a PLA keeps melting. Like for example, if you're making a motor mount, motor mounts, if your motor tends to get hot, will just melt right through, and there goes your motor, and your plane will stay back. So instead, you might want to print that piece out of PLA or out of PVC. Sorry. And there's a bunch of other. I mean, there's a lot of other filaments. I mean, you can print food, and a bunch of. I mean, really, I won't even get into it. Chocolates, that kind of thing. It's great. However, this is not for that. But TPU is a common thing. I print my tires out of TPU because they have a lot of give. They're sturdy enough.
I thought you were using the Flex PLA.
Nope. So Flex PLA probably has a TPU infused PLA. But this is actually TPU. This is a slightly different thing. Again, it's the material that's more flexible. And like I said, PVC I have, and PETG. And I can't remember why I have PETG. I think it had more to do with some of its hardness properties. But a lot of people swear by find one they love, and then they kind of stick with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, with whatever you're printing with, and I will only speak to PLA for now, find the temperature that works, and that's going to take some experimenting.
Mm-hmm.
And the temperature will not necessarily be the same if you use black PLA from this brand and black PLA from that brand. There could be some differences in temperature.
Yeah.
I myself have experienced a 5 degrees Celsius swing between one brand and the other to get things to print.
Yep. Also, you have to worry about if you have, like I have a register that's above mine. And so what I should be doing is deflecting the air that's coming off the register so that it doesn't create an air current and when the heat is on or the cold is on in the summer, that it's not artificially cooling the bed or quickly cooling the bed before the PLA has a chance to truly fuse and set. So it ends up creating poor layer adhesion as opposed to in the winter when I'm putting heat through it, it's okay, and it prints wonderfully.
Okay.
Those are other things to consider. Speaking of it, you've got a whole list of things we need to be watching out for, right?
A little bit, and these are just some things that I've encountered, things to consider and be mindful of. This is by far not exhaustive, just based on some of my experience. Level your bed.
How and then level it again.
And then level your bed. Ideally,
tell me how you're supposed to do that. Because I know how I have done it.
I'll tell you how I have done it.
Okay. Let's compare notes. Hold on, let me pull my notes out.
So I will speak pre CR Touch. That's a modification I have on mine. But I would basically I'd tell my 3D printer to auto home, and then that will take the Z axis all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll like raise it up a little bit when it's done. But then from there, I take my X and Y, and I will position the nozzle over each of the hand crank underneath the hand cranks underneath the bed. So those hand cranks you can turn one way or the other, and it'll tighten or loosen, which will raise or lower the bed. And the nozzle is in pretty much the down position, and so I will place the nozzle at fairly close. It doesn't have to be exact, but I will place it over that screw, and then bring the bed up pretty much to the nozzle, and I use a sheet of paper, place it on the bed, and I steady move that piece of paper as I raise the bed until I feel the nozzle start to grab the paper. Mm-hmm. If it grabs it and I can't move it, I'm too tight.
And this is a standard letter size, standard weight paper for a printer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, I've used my bank statement before. Just whatever paper I had on hand.
Mm-hmm. You don't need
not like a heavyweight or a card stock or anything like that.
Right, exactly. And you're not needing to grab like origami paper or anything thin. Just your
standard paper. I'll do, front left corner. I'll swing my my nozzle all the way to the right, and I'll put it over the front right screw. And then I'll bring that one up to level. Basically, again, I'll bring it up to it's grabbing the paper. It's starting to grab the paper. If I can't move the paper, I'm tearing the paper. I feel it like really catching. I'm too tight. But if I don't feel any friction, then I'm too loose. And then I will go for the back. So I do the 4 corners over each of the springs. But then I made the mistake of only going around the bed once. When you get one corner in, but then you bring the other corners in, each corner is going to knock each other corner off. So you need to make at least 2 laps around the bed, leveling.
So you weren't kidding. Do it once, then do it again, and then one last time to basically confirm that you have it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And I've gotten in, when I leveled my bed, I go around it at least twice, more if needed. You'll see the difference. You level the front corner, and then you work your way around the bed, and when you come back to that front corner, your nozzle's going to be off the bed a ways, or it's going to be dragging its way up there, and dragging into your print bed. Again, I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, because if you had a glass bed, you'd be scratching it.
I've got a glass bed. Those are amazing once you get the bed level and set. Otherwise, you hear this sickening, and you're like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, and I had problems where mine wasn't level, and as my first layer would print, I thought it was level, but it wasn't. And it would start printing just fine, but then as it worked its way around the bed, it started dragging into the bed, and it wasn't laying filament, which then would sit there and cause my extruder servo to click, because it couldn't advance the filament. And then I got into issues, because it would go on long enough, you could get into issues of heat creep, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Monitor your Z offset. Now, I don't recall messing with the Z offset really prior to installing my CR Touch.
Oh, okay.
But your Z offset basically determines, I guess, the home position, when your nozzle's in the home position, how far off the bed it is.
Wow.
It's basically dictating where the bed is relative to where it thinks the end of the nozzle is. And
okay, so once you figure out it's grabbing the paper, does it automatically have a basic offset that's already in the system? There's already a default?
I don't remember, because it's been so long since I messed around with mine before the CR Touch.
Okay.
So I don't remember messing with Z offset before I put the CR Touch on it. Now I can tell you, now that I have the CR Touch on it, and I upgraded the firmware to take into account that I have the CR Touch. And the CR Touch is an auto bed leveling probe that goes around and touches the bed in different spots and kind of auto levels. As long as you're close to start with, in theory. I have to mess with my Z offset with that, because it's then trying to figure out where the end of the nozzle is compared to where the probe is triggering as the vertical offset. Okay. And so in the firmware for Marlin, I think it's the firmware I'm using.
Yeah, I think with those printers,
it has a Z offset wizard in the menus. But you go into the wizard, it auto homes the thing, and it auto homes, and then it raises the extruder a ways, and then you walk the extruder down until it's grabbing lightly on that piece of paper, and you can go through whole millimeter steps, quarter millimeter steps, tenth, like eighth millimeter steps, 10th millimeter steps, 0.01, 0.0125 millimeter steps, walking that down so you can get it very accurately. And then once you get it, that Z offset, you save it and it automatically goes from there. But, again, I had forgotten if I needed the Z offset prior to the CR Touch, but I know Z offset was a setting prior to the CR Touch. So, look that one up relative to your model and what you need.
Yep.
Ensure that various nuts and bolts all around your 3D printer are tight.
Use the blue Loctite.
Maybe.
The blue color of the liquid.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, that'll keep it in place, right?
I don't know that I don't know if I would suggest that. Maybe.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, so I say that because I've had two separate issues related to things not being tight. The first being my 3D printer, the Z-axis, the up-down screw that drives it up and down, I only have that on one side. I don't have it on both sides of my crossbeam. So only one side is taking the load of lifting that whole bar up. The other side is kept level, like the bar is kept level by the pressure put in place by all of the wheels and bearings that crossbeam rides the uprights with. I didn't realize those wheels have orbital nuts. Is that the...
Yeah, well, they have a wheel that goes around the nut.
Yeah. As you can loosen part of it and then tighten another part of it, and that gives a bit of a rotate because it's off center where this is happening, and that causes that wheel to tighten down on the surface that it's sitting into, and then you tighten the back of the nut that tightens all that down and holds it. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but when you put one of these together, you'll see it. I did not get that very tight, and so I got play in mine. And my cross beam, I think I told you about it at the time and even mentioned it here, my cross beam that carries my extruder drooped heavily on one side. And so I was able to get my bed level relative, but every time I looked at it, I was like, that's just so wild. I got one end backed all the way out, and the other side maximized. And I finally looked at it, and my bed's like up at like a 10-degree angle. I'm like, what is happening here? And then it dawned, I finally saw it.
Oh, yeah. My cross beam isn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what they do recommend is that you basically measure off of the bottom where the rods are, is to measure that height and make sure that that is constant across the frame. And then once that's set, then you can effectively start leveling your bed. Because if that's not level, what's the point? It's easy for that nut to skip a step in the stepper motor, or the belt to skip a gear cog. And then that kind of throws everything off a little bit. So pay attention to it.
The other location I've had problems with those getting loose is the wheels that carry the bed forward and back. So my bed goes forward and back, and then the extruder goes left, right, and up, down. Well, the wheels that carry the bed forward and back got loose. And so I didn't realize it, but my bed had a wobble to it based on, And when I finally caught it was when I was moving the bed, and the wires that plugged into the bed that drove the heating part of the bed. I noticed that those wires, as they moved and kind of rolled, that they kind of lifted and then lowered the back corner of my bed. And so my bed had play in it, which was causing, even though I would try to level the bed, as things got going, that bed it seemed like my bed was constantly moving, constantly out of level. I could never get it to stay.
Yep.
It's because I had loose stuff. So
yep, it's tough to keep it consistent.
When things move, there's
as
no
you're doing it, right?
So monitor your stuff and make sure that everything's tight. Keep your hot end clean. There's a couple things that can go into that, but if you start, I don't know. I'm a fan of when the print is done. I don't like to leave the plastic hanging if possible from the end. When my end gets a bit covered in plastic because maybe it failed at starting to print, and so it went back through its own stuff, or it was pooling or whatever. Sometimes the plastic, the PLA gets back up on the nozzle and starts making a mess. Like I want to keep the end of my nozzle clean. But I have had it where I don't remember how exactly this happened, but it was pushing the filament out the nozzle, and it was going out of the nozzle, going up the outside surface of the nozzle, under the rubber boot that covers the whole underside of the hot end. It was filling all that up.
Oh, yeah. Yep, I've had that happen, and it's like, well, now I can't clean that. I have to heat everything up. So now I'm trying to deal with molten plastic everywhere, trying not to burn myself on the hot end. That's got to be hot so you can remove the plastic.
I managed to catch on that it was happening before it got like all kinds of bad, but I don't know how that happened. I just happened to catch it because I try to keep an eye on my end and make sure it's staying clean. Humidity. Well, before I go into the next one, keeping your end clean. You can consider getting a filament. I say a filament filter.
Okay.
You can 3D. You can 3D print them, and you basically just stuff a piece of cotton inside this round thing that clips around your filament. Or
if you have a little piece of foam, it's basically something to, and you either wet it or you put a little bit of not wet. I think a lot of people suggest a little bit of oil maybe, or something that would just give enough where it pulls off anything that's stuck to your filament and cleans it before it gets out.
And I'm not even going that far at this point. I've got some large open cell foam that the nozzle cleaning needle came with. Mm-hmm. And I've taken and cut that into a square and then sliced into it, and then, and just stuff that around the filament. And as the filament advances, that foam butts up against where it can't go. Mm-hmm. And, the printer pulls the filament through it. And that pulls off any of the big dust particles. Yeah. That, because I had such a problem with clogging.
Yeah. And then once you put that filter, how's it been?
I was still having clogging issues.
Oh, your answer was supposed to be, it's way better, thanks.
Yeah, well, my clogging was not that problem.
Oh,
but
okay.
That's going to prevent that from being a problem.
Yeah, it's going to improve it significantly.
So whether you use some random piece of open cell foam or one of your first 3D prints is to print off a little enclosure, because they've got them on Thingiverse, different models, where you can open them up, put some cotton in there, and then clamp that around your filament. They got filament guides and all that I thought I might need, but I didn't. Right. Humidity. PLA gets wet.
What?
I didn't know that, but it gets wet.
Okay.
And it'll get wet in dry air.
It will. It'll absorb the moisture. Hey, guess what? North Carolina and South Carolina have plenty of.
Yeah, we do.
Humidity, baby.
So PLA is a thirsty plastic and will drink the water out of the air. when, and I guess when that happens and it becomes sufficiently saturated with water, that can cause clogging issues, as I understand.
It prints poorly and it kind of sputters and pops in your right. It creates clogging because it's a varying consistency of the material. It's no longer homogeneous. It ends up being different densities, effectively.
Okay.
So what they do recommend that you can put it in like a, what is it, 180 degree, what is a Fahrenheit that, it's like a
it's basically 55 degrees Celsius.
Okay, which I think, let's see, it's a low heat oven.
Yeah, it's a very low heat in the oven, but if you get into a situation...
130 degrees Fahrenheit is 55 degrees Celsius.
Okay. If you get into a situation where your PLA has become saturated or is becoming saturated, you can dry your filament out. I'd say look up a guide on it from somebody more experienced than us. But you're going to find probably the same stuff we have found. We'll just say preheat your oven to about 135 degrees and stuff your PLA in the oven for a couple hours.
Yep, and you just kind of let it hang out there for a while. And then that'll get all the moisture out, and then you're able to use it again successfully. Matter of fact, I think that's what a lot of my problem was with the ANET A8. So what I haven't gone and done is, besides dust everything off, go and just try a new round of filament and just run it through and see if it prints well. Because it might at this point.
Now, something to consider, and I don't think it is, but does PLA off gas? There's nothing to off gas.
PLA does not. PLA is
but be mindful.
Is it polylactic acetate or something?
It's something. But be mindful of your PLA hybrids that have other things in them that might off gas, or your PETGs and the other filament types, because those several of those will be off gas capable. There are multiple filaments that you don't print inside unless you have an enclosure with a vented hood. I know Matthew didn't really mention those as he went through them, but be aware of the filament that you're printing.
The big one is PVC. I know, as I understand it, TPU, if it has any, it's minorly harmful, as it were. Like you have to really be aggressive with it for it to be harmful. But PVC does have enough. A lot of people don't like, well, if it's not big quantities, it's not a big deal. But if you're doing it, I would recommend either having a hood or doing it in a space that's that has I'll call exterior, like a garage, where there's repeated air exchanges.
I'm looking at our time, and this has already gone on longer than I thought it would.
I know. You see how that works?
Yeah, we're good at blowing smoke for a while.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Problems that I've encountered, and I've already talked about a couple of these. An unlevel bed. I have said before, screw leveling the bed, I'm just going to print it. And that's when I found out that your nozzle will drag the bed. And it won't print when it's dragging on the bed, and it scratches your bed. So, level your bed, then level it again, and then level it again for good measure. And ideally do that before every print. Because...
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't, but I should. If I was really adamant that I wanted every print to be very precise and I didn't want to have problems, I would check my bed level every time. Right now, I check it about every other time.
I found that one out every, by about 6 or 7 prints, it's time to do an earnest go through again.
Sure. But when I was having those problems...
every time.
It was also because of the next problem. Loose bolts and nuts.
Tighten them up.
Go around, make sure things are tight. Make sure things are tight and level, especially if you have that crossbar like I have. And if you get one, you're putting it together from scratch, or you're assembling the Creality Ender 3,
Mm-hmm.
take a few extra minutes, be better than me, and make sure that as you're assembling it, that it all comes together square, that it's all upright and proper and level.
Mm-hmm.
I did not. I've not had. I don't think I've had any problems that are being contributed to by it being out of square, but I don't know necessarily how far my unit's out of square. Heat creep. I mentioned this earlier.
Yeah,
Heat
explain what
creep.
that is. What does that mean?
So I'm going to try to do this in a way without speaking a novel, but also not making sense. Your hot end. Let's. I'm going to throw a number out here. It's wrong, but let's say your hot end is 3 inches long. Okay, that's the whole length of the metal that your filament feeds into, and then gets heated up in, and then the nozzle screws into the bottom of that. Of that, about the last inch is your hot. That's where the heating and the melting and everything occurs. Above that, the previous 2 inches on top of that have a lot of radiating grills, and there's a fan that blows to bleed off the heat, but it still needs to be a metal enclosure. Okay, but the heat from the hot end will travel upward because it's metal. It's going to go through it, and so those fins are there. The fans are there to keep the upper part of this assembly cool. Why? Your Bowden tube pushes down through the top of that and goes all the way down almost to that 1 inch zone where things are getting really freaking hot. And It's really freaking hot because it's melting that PLA. That Bowden tube butts up down in the bottom of that shaft to an equally large hole that the filament goes through. And it guides the filament down through into that. The filament needs to be cool enough that it's still solid while it's in the tube, but then it gets pushed out the tube, travels a little bit, and then enters the area of the hot end where it actually melts. And then the pressure of, like a hydraulic pressure, of the filament pushing down into the hot end, filling that chamber, is like squeezing toothpaste out of the tube, is what squeezes the plastic filament out of the hot end. And then when it says, oh, I'm done printing, and it stops, or it pulls the filament back just a little bit, not too much, just a little bit, that relieves that pressure that was pressing the plastic out. Now, gravity still does a thing and pulls it through the nozzle slowly, but that's how that happens. Now, heat creep will occur when heat is always creeping up into that upper area.
Okay.
That's fine. It's always warm there. But it's a problem when it gets too hot in that upper region, because then the PLA starts melting while it's still in the Bowden tube. Okay? And once it starts melting while it's in the Bowden tube, even if it doesn't liquefy, but it just softens, then it becomes spongy. And as that extruder motor tries to push it, you ever like bread dough or like Play-Doh?
Mm-hmm.
You had it rolled in a log.
Mm-hmm.
You pushed it together and it fattened up.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what's happening inside that Bowden tube. And then that kind of that effect ends up traveling a little further back into the tube, to the point that then it reaches a point where it's fattened up, but it's cooling, and it's solidified back up.
Mm-hmm.
And that locks the filament in the tube.
Uh-huh.
This confused the heck out of me.
Yeah, well, because the only way to really see it is to take the entire thing apart, really. And that's not something you really want to do when you're like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't want to take it all apart. This is already bad enough.
Well, I'll give you the symptom that was confusing me, but was the telltale that that's what had happened, was that the filament has swollen inside the tube, which was my extruder motor would cut my filament, and that's where it was slipping trying to print.
Okay.
The filament had already had this problem. It was bogged up in the I would have varying degrees of this problem. Okay. There were times where it was just right at the threshold, and so it was fattening up and it wasn't printing, but I wasn't having problem retracting. But when my extruder motor was trying to advance the filament and it couldn't, because it wasn't going, then that brass gear that has ridges on it was slowly sawing through the filament until it cut the filament.
Okay.
I thought my extruder was just not grabbing the filament hard enough.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I proceeded to crank that puppy down,
which it couldn't push it anymore.
Well, I just
you didn't
thought
know
that,
that,
it,
but
I thought it was slipping.
Yeah.
So I cranked that puppy down so it would grab that filament, and it grabbed it. Then I had the problem. Then I encountered extruder clicking. But
right.
my stepper motor was actually skipping. So remember earlier when I said a stepper motor is high torque?
Oh yeah.
It was really trying to push it, but that brass gear was biting into that filament so hard that the filament wasn't given and the brass gear couldn't slip. That stepper motor would build up its torque and then it would just click. It would skip. And that made an audible thunk, thunk, thunk. And eventually it started doing it, trying to push the PLA and trying to pull the PLA when I would try to retract the PLA. So if I were to go in and try to back the extruder out and have the extruder motor pull the filament out of the tube, because when I would have issues, I would, like, the gear would kind of wear on the filament. I would want to pull the filament out, cut off, basically starting at that problem, cut where the gear had interfaced, cut all that off, and then feed it back in fresh filament so that I knew that my gears had good stuff to bite. I was worrying that maybe the gear was warping my filament and such. Immature thoughts, because I really didn't understand it, and I still don't fully understand it. But I would try to...
It's complex. Like, the whole thing is it's a lot to figure out and learn, and when you're having an issue, you're like, what in the world? It was doing fine just a minute ago.
So when I would try to use the stepper motor or the extruder motor to back the filament out, it was also skipping in reverse because it couldn't pull the filament out of the hose.
Yeah, because now it's locked in with all the goo.
Right. And I ended up having to deconstruct pretty much my entire hot end to get it out. And that's when I discovered that, because I bought some cheap PLA. I thought maybe it was the PLA was bad. I ordered in another roll of good PLA that I knew had printed well, but I figured it out beforehand, before that got here, that I was having heat creep issues. And I think it was because I didn't get a perfectly squared off cut on my Bowden tube. Your Bowden tube needs to be perfectly flat cut. Not at an angle. Don't bevel it.
Nope. Perfect 90 degrees.
Don't do like slightly like, oh, I want to be cute, so it sets in and flushes. Nope.
It comes to the device.
I don't remember mine coming with a device.
Okay, I bought a special brand or whatever, and it came
Okay.
with a cutter, which I was like, well, I can do that with an X-Acto knife just as well.
And
but
don't use
still,
a pair of scissors.
No, you squish everything.
Yeah.
X-Acto blade, set it up against something that is, even if it's a 90-degree angle, literally against the table, do the thing, tape the tube, and slice down your 90-degree thing through your tube, and you'll have at least as perfect an angle as you can get, both vertically and aligned with the tube.
Because what you can get is if there's any gap there,
that's where it all squeezes out.
Yeah. If it's not perfectly flush all the way through, you can start to get, because all this is happening right on the threshold of where this filament is melting. Okay, it's warm, it's getting soft. Then it's going to go in and get liquefied. Like, it's all happening right there. And so if you cut it at a very slight angle, and once it goes down into the hot end, that angle is going to cause it to not sit perfectly flush, and then you're going to have potential bleeding issues of the liquid filament. That's going to further amplify the heat creep issue. Go look up a video on heat creep. It's going to explain it far better than I can, but I'm telling you, that was the problem I was experiencing.
Yep. And honestly, I don't care who you are. One of our forum members described it pretty well, that basically when it works well, it's amazing and it works for a while, but you need to say, hey, it's been going good for a little bit. Let me just run through the calibrations and do the check, make sure all the bolts are tight, make sure all the stuff is good. It needs that regular maintenance. And he's like, it's not unlike, when you have a bike, you can run a bike all the way for a long while, but you do need to check the spokes. You need to oil the chain. You need to do some of the basic maintenance. This is a new tech, so that maintenance period is much lower than something that's been tried, true, tested, and all the stuff has been figured out, right? So like a bike has been around for a long time. So, this is only a youngster in that game. Just give it some leeway. Just know it's going to take maintenance more often. And if you look at it that way, you'll have a better time with it. And remember, it's a hobby for fun, unless you're making a ton of money with it, in which case we would love to hear how you're doing that.
Well, I thought about trying to do a little something and have it turn some profit, but the amount of time you need to spend on the front end to get it and understand it, and then be able to scale from there is props to those who are running these 3D printer farms and doing a business out of it. But before we start wrapping all that up, I have one last problem I've encountered.
Okay.
And we've both encountered this at this point. We've recently taken steps to try to alleviate yours. I doubt you've had time to mess with it, but we've worked on it. And that is bad firmware. Firmware.
What do you mean bad? Old?
Maybe not bad, but incorrect. Okay. Or you make the changes to your device, you make changes to your printer that require a firmware update, and you don't make the firmware update. And now it's not working correctly because it's quote unquote bad firmware because you've made changes and you were supposed to update it. What am I talking about having made changes? I installed the CR Touch probe, auto level bed probe. And in order to bring that functionality into being, I had to hook it up a certain way into the motherboard and then disconnect the Z stop switch. But I also needed to upgrade my firmware to a version of the firmware that supported the CR Touch. In that process, I didn't know what firmware to use because the firmwares on Creality's site talked about the BL Touch, and then it was talking about, was it the 8-bit version or the 32-bit ARM, or was it this or that? And I looked and tried to figure, and I took my best guess and downloaded some firmware and flashed it to my printer, and then my stepper motors wouldn't move I turned it on and they would just sit there and hum. And they were humming because they were just sitting there vibrating. So not good. And I tried a couple different times, a couple different firmwares, and then I said, you know what, I'll just go back to the original firmware. And guess what? I couldn't find the original firmware for this machine.
Oh, no.
So that's why it sat for a while, not being used after I put the CR Touch on it. And what ended up having to happen was that finally I looked up a video on how to basically build the firmware from the ground up. I went and grabbed the source code for the Merlin firmware, followed along a guy on YouTube that walked through here's programs you need and dependent or programs and environments that program had as dependencies for it to function. And then now you load up the firmware source code into, and we're going to go, and I followed through with him, go through, make all these changes to the source code for what we're wanting to do to enable the BL Touch, to configure how it's going to work, to to set up certain things for my particular model so that the numbers were right. It wasn't the biggest, scariest thing in the world. It just took me an hour or two to go through and do it all. And when it was all said and done, I printed off, as it were. I exported my firmware, loaded it up in my 3D printer, and it works. And
nice.
now it says Merlin version Joe.
Sweet.
It's on the LCD screen. So
you might as well get something out of that.
That's right. And so now it's been working. I want to go back into the firmware. Mine only tests the bed in 9 locations for the auto level. I'd like to. I may turn the code off to test the bed before every print. And then I'll just manually tell it to read the bed. But I think I want to do change the firmware to test the bed in so the 9 touch is a 3x3. It basically just grids the bed out. And so rather than doing 9 touches, I think I might want to do a 5x5, or if I want to be really stupid, sometimes just do a 10x10. Once I get Octoprint hooked up, because that can read that information and give you a level, and give you a visualization of the leveling of your bed, if I'm understanding what I saw correctly.
I'm not sure, but yes. There are a number of different
map,
upgrades.
That's what I wanted.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yep. Cool.
So, yeah, that's, and then I went through and had to do something very similar, but different in certain areas for yours to get your firmware, because your firmware hasn't been working with what you've got.
No, it's yeah, exactly.
So
because again, I wanted to also have BL Heli Touch, or whatever. Sorry, confusing ESE lingo. the BL Touch thing, getting that working, I figured that would help. So
yeah,
it'd just be nice.
And then the only other mod I have on mine is a magnetic bed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a magnetic surface that adheres down, and then the bed is magnetic and will stick to that. So I don't have to have the binder clips to hold the bed on. I just magnetize it on and I pull it off. I've not gone to the glass bed. I'm not brave enough that I won't scratch the mess out of it.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, those the only other ones I think I've done the filament holder, and I feel like that's helped. some stiffeners for the N888. That was pretty helpful. A little nut, like theirs is like a wing nut, where it's like just the actual nut. It's really for the bed leveling. It's awful. So having a wheel that goes around that nut, really helpful.
Okay.
Some of those things like that. I've printed a little tool, caddy, I'll call it. That sits at
I've
the top.
got one of those.
And those are great because you can put all the Allen wrenches in it. You can put the 2 or 3 different wrenches, the scraper, and a couple cards. And that has been helpful, at least generally keeping track of it.
In theory, there's 2 Allen wrenches. I couldn't tell you where they're at right now because
look, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a great idea, and it certainly helps me keep some of that together.
Now,
so it's helpful for me.
The Enders, they've got a shelf. So Thingiverse, there's like a 2-drawer thing that can go under the bed of the Ender. I printed the outer box of that and tried to put it in under and the wheels. You get nothing. The nuts of the wheels or the bolts of the wheels were getting in the way of that drawer being there. I was like, it said it would work with mine, but it won't. Garbage. Turns out I installed those nuts the wrong way, or the bolts the wrong way.
Oh no, they're supposed to go up, not down.
Right. So the excess length was supposed to be up top, and the short nubbies were supposed to. Yeah, and that's why that. So if you were, when you go to put your Ender together, it'll work either way. But if you want that drawer to work, those bolts have to go a certain way.
You'll go fix it.
And that's what this is. The bolts that that connect the wheel beds, the bed wheels to the bed.
Okay. Yep. I know exactly which ones you mean.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, cool. I think, do we have anything other that you don't feel like people can live without?
I feel like people can't live without me shutting up now, because it's been, they've been listening to me talk about 3D printers that I don't really understand for a little over an hour. So,
well, that sounds like me talking about all the subjects I bring up. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, but you're at least good at making it sound like you know what you're talking about.
You say that now. All right. Anyway, don't worry about it. You sounded like I know you've been through these things, and I know you're versed in it through trial by fire. So while you don't always understand, the good news is there are a lot of resources for troubleshooting. There's a lot of resources for understanding what's going on and maybe getting to the bottom of some of these things. We're going to put a link to this website called All3DP, or 3D printing basically.com. And they are a great resource in general. I've used them a number of times to kind of understand, at least get started with where do I go? I've got this problem. Where do I start looking? And then we're going to put a link to calibration article that they put together. There's a handful of calibration things that they recommend, with temperature trees, and, like you were saying, you have a 9-point calibration test that you kind of run. There's a couple other ones that they recommend. Anyway, so take a look at that if that helps you. Hope it does.
I also, when I'm feeling, when I get a wild hair, when I go to level my bed, I will preheat my hot end and my bed.
Oh yeah, me too.
I don't always do it, but
it may not be to the full temperature, but I always start off by saying, okay, preheat everything to like set of 190 or whatever it is for the head, and then 60 for the bed, and then I put in the model. So by the time the models, I finally found it in my list of all the things I want to print. I put it in there, and then I tell it to print, and it's like, oh, well, I'm almost there. Good, let's get started. Yeah. So that's
the CR Touch, the probe will wait until the ends have heated before it necessarily goes and does its thing. I'm saying when I'm manually leveling the bed, sometimes I'll preheat everything.
Yeah, same here.
And if you're go check out All3DP. Also, we do have a dedicated 3D printer text channel in the Discord. Not to continuously harp that, but We've got multiple guys in the community who are doing 3D printing and who are skilled at it. So if you got questions, come by and ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we don't know them, we know people who do. So, come by and ask. I think that's about it. If you want to reach out with any questions about 3D printers, send it to Joe at aviationrcnoob.com. Or you can send it to Matthew at aviationrcnoob.com. You can also reach us both at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. I know all our patrons cringe when I say this has been Matt from the Aviation RC Noob podcast saying goodbye. I think we're ready. Are we almost ready, Joe? I think I'm ready.
Are we? Because you had the intro, and now you're stealing the outro.
Oh, man, I thought I could get away with both. You talked so long on the 3D printers, I thought you were, like, tired of talking. No. Joe, bring us out. Do me a favor.
No, you know it's my jam. All right.
I know. Do it.
All right, guys. As always, we thank you for tuning in and listening. We hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as we've enjoyed having it. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, take them to the HR department, HR at aviationrcnoob.com. If you get kickback of undeliverable mail, try again and repeat as necessary. But for real, swing by and see us. Let us know if that was helpful for you, or if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Discord. But yeah, that really is about it. You ready to get out of here?
Yeah, I'm ready to get out of here. We're going to have a lot of stuff for you next time, as we're going to kick butt in the hobby for the next couple weeks. I'm looking forward to what you get yourself into, Joe. I know I'm going to be closing up the Build-ruary process, so we'll see if I can manage to hit those 4 flying models by the end of the week, by the end of the next 2 weeks here.
Good luck.
Other than that, I want to thank our patrons for helping us make this thing keep going. And I urge the rest of you guys, if you aren't considering it, take a look. If you want to help us pass this to somebody else who you think might enjoy it. Otherwise, I'm Matt.
I'm Joe.
And we're out of here. Bye.
Meow.
Oh my God. I wish my models looked half as good as what comes out of some of these people's printer. I'm like, what did you do?
Yeah.
You guys are crazy.
I mean, when mine prints,
yours prints nice.
Yeah, when mine prints and I'm printing something that's not a mini, it does pretty good. Don't worry about typing all that in right now. Today we total up.
I usually try to put a blurb or two. All right.
I was making fun that you couldn't type.
Oh, I can't type. It's awful. It's worse and worse. I swear.
I was watching.
I know. Well, my fingers were off. 3D printing, a love affair, a Valentine's Day special. Gotta love it and hate it all at the same time.
Got your whistle wetter?
Yeah. But it's not making it wet because I put Conformal Coat on first. Conformal Coat, the new sponsor of today's podcast.
What is Conformal Coat?
Conformal coating is a waterproofing you put on electronics.
Why don't you put that on your lips?
I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. But it's a good segue to our new sponsor. Just kidding. We don't have sponsors. We have Patreons.
Wouldn't hurt my feelings if Dr. Pepper wanted to sponsor us with free drinks.
I prefer Barks.
You're not wrong. You said Barks, right?
Yeah, I said Barks.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, just saying, look, they're both good. I'd prefer Barks if we had a choice.
I guess if I had a choice, sure. I need the Dr. Pepper because I gotta have a caffeine drink.